My next guest is a top supporter of President Trump in the House of Representatives and also the author of a brand new book called Poisoned Ivies, the Inside Account of the Academic and Moral Rot at America's Elite Universities. Joining us now, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, Republican of New York. Thanks for joining us, Congresswoman. Let's talk about your book, Poisoned Ivies. Yale just issued a report blaming universities for losing the public trust in higher education. Yale calling for a series of changes. What is your view of what needs to be changed in higher ed to fix what you describe as moral bankruptcy and rot?
Well, my view is the Yale report would not have happened were it not for the congressional oversight that the House Education Committee conducted, particularly in that university hearing, which was the most viewed testimony in the history of Congress with the presidents of Harvard, Penn, and MIT. In that hearing, it became very clear how much our higher education institutions have fundamentally lost their way. The Yale report has very similar recommendations as my book, but again, these universities weren't going to fix themselves. It identifies the ideological bent further and further to the left. I identify the faculty tenure program as the self-selection, which has created increasingly out-of-touch ideologies. If you look at the delta, it used to be 1-to-1 decades ago, Jake, of conservative to liberals. Now it's 88 liberals to every one conservative in some of these humanities departments. That's the case of Harvard. I also identify foreign funding. You have foreign dollars that are flowing to these universities from Qatar and communist China. That was recently released by the Department of Education. That undermines many of the principles, and I believe there have been strings attached to the curricula that's being taught and the type of professors that are being hired. In addition, I identify the percentage of foreign students. I think it is news to many Americans that at Columbia, for example, 40% of the student body are foreign students, and many of those students, some of them, were organizing the pro-Hamas encampments that led to riots and targeting of American Jewish students, as well as destruction of property. So that hearing set off an earthquake in higher education that we're still feeling the reverberations of, and it's going to happen for years to come.
I have met some foreign students at my alma mater, and I understand what you're saying when you talk about ones that come with extremist ideologies, but the ones I've met have been remarkable. I met somebody who was an Afghan and rose from a small town in Afghanistan. And do you worry at all about demonizing foreign students? Again, I understand what you're talking about. Some of them come with...
Absolutely, I'm not...
Go ahead.
Right. Just to answer that question, my proposal is to cap it at 15% per institution. So when you have a counterexample, Jake, in example of Mahmoud Khalil at Columbia, who literally organized the pro-Hamas encampment that destroyed Hamilton Hall, that targeted American Jewish students, those individuals need to be deported. And if you also think about these institutions rely on billions of dollars of U.S. taxpayer funds, I believe they should be prioritizing American students. So I talk about capping that percentage, that it's gotten disconnected from the founding missions, which was to educate American students. And what's interesting is many of these institutions, particularly the most considered elite, were prior to our nation's founding. That's the case of Harvard, of Penn, of Columbia. And the book argues that they fundamentally lost their way. And what's interesting is people are voting with their feet in their wallets. Where you see admissions and matriculation rates declining for the traditional Ivy League schools, they're increasing dramatically at institutions like Vanderbilt, University of Florida, University at Austin, etc.
The Trump administration right now, in furtherance of the mission that you're discussing, is requesting the names of Jewish student, faculty, community members at the University of Pennsylvania. The Trump administration says they're doing this in order to identify potential victims of anti-Semitism, part of an EEOC investigation. But not only has the University of Pennsylvania opposed the subpoena on privacy grounds and First Amendment grounds, but the school's Jewish community, including members of Hillel, they oppose this request. They say that making a list, compiling such a list, it misses the historical context of Jews being targeted by governments. Do you understand the reluctance of Jews at Penn to compile such a list and give it to the government?
Well, certainly many Jewish students at Penn reached out to the Congressional Committee and to the Trump administration raising concerns of the targeting at Penn. Penn was one of the worst actors, Jake. That's why you saw within 48 hours of the congressional hearing the resignation of Liz McGill. That's why you continue to see leaders like Mark Rowan speaking out and holding Penn accountable, a very prominent alumni, and students as well who have pending lawsuits with Penn. And my concern here is in the congressional testimony, I actually asked Claudine Gay, the former president of Harvard, the percentage percentage of Jewish students, which has declined precipitously. She could not admit that because she said, oh, we don't want to collect this data. The reality is Hillel has this data and collects this data. So on top of the academic and moral rot, I believe that we're going to uncover, which is the case for many of these schools, an admissions scandal that you've seen. The percentage of Jewish students who have been accepted has declined significantly. It's fallen off of a cliff, and I believe that is because of the roots of anti-Semitism. So we've seen these schools won't fix themselves, and I know there's been some pushback from these institutions to the administration. This administration has worked with Congress on day one to ensure these schools are held accountable.
One of the reasons why a lot of Jews at Penn are reluctant to make a list of Jews and then hand it over to the government is because anti-Semitism is not only a problem on the political left, which it is, but also on the political right. And there are some people in the Trump administration that have been accused of anti-Semitism and ties to anti-Semites. Your critics have said that you're much more willing to call out anti-Semitism on the left than on the right, and that by suggesting it's not the problem, it is on the right, you're helping enable it. How do you respond to that criticism?
I would respond to that, Jake. I have been the leading voice in the United States Congress of both parties in combating anti-Semitism. I have called out individuals on the right, including organizations within my home state, the New York Young Republicans, where you saw examples of heinous anti-Semitism. I was the highest ranking official to not only condemn that, but decertify that institution in the state of New York. So I've been crystal clear on this. And in fact, I've been attacked by some of the voices who are not elected but are anti-Semitic on the right. The reality is, the difference is, if you look at the makeup of Congress, the vast majority, except for a handful of Republicans, have had very strong records when it comes to combating anti-Semitism. You look at the left, the anti-Semites have taken over the Democrat Party. It's the majority of the votes. And in New York, we see this firsthand when you have a high-ranking official in Zohran Mamdani, whose top campaign aides are anti-Semitic, who has made anti-Semitic statements in his past. So yes, you can ask about questions about podcasters. The reality is the elected officials on the Republican side have been crystal clear in condemning and combating anti-Semitism, and I've been proud to lead that effort at the highest levels.
When there was an effort to purge anti-Semitism and those who platform them from the Republican Party recently, Vice President Vance rejected it. He called it a purity test. What do you think? Is it a purity test, or is it important to do?
I stand by my record that I believe that the elected officials need to continue to speak out very strongly. I think that the Trump administration has been tremendous in the executive actions they have issued. I mean, we worked very closely with President Trump and Secretary Linda McMahon on day one in the issuance of the executive orders to make sure American Jewish students are protected, to combat and condemn anti-Semitism, to stand strongly by our close ally Israel. And that has been a real success story. And again, I stand by my record. It is very different than what we're seeing in the Democrat Party, where there is a full-blown takeover of the Democrat establishment of anti-Semitic elected officials who have refused to condemn anti-Semitism, whether you look at the mayor of New York City or whether you look at some of these primary races on the Democratic side. That is not the case on the Republican side. And again, this book, which is being read not just by Republicans, Jake, but Democrats as well, it was a reckoning on those college campuses that it needed to happen to fix these higher education institutions.
You were praised by many in the Jewish community when you criticized the college presidents who refused to condemn students for chanting from the river to the sea, which many Jews interpret to be, and you agreed, you characterized as genocide, a call for genocide, to wipe out all the Jews in Israel from the river to the sea. So just to be clear, you believe that wiping out an entire civilization is genocidal and nobody should make a call to do such a thing.
Yes, of course, and that's why the question I asked, which was, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate your university's code of conduct, yes or no? I worded it because it was a very simple, straightforward question. It was not a political one, and the world heard as these universities equivocated, saying it depends on the context or it's a context-dependent decision. It is not, and we have seen that they didn't think there was anything wrong with those answers. That's why there were a billion views of that testimony, and it created an earthquake in higher education. And importantly, these schools are now having to reckon with this. That's why earlier in the show, when you pointed out the Yale report, that is a step in the right direction, is starting to address internal issues. But let's see if there's action taken on these university campuses, because we've had to take very specific steps from the Department of Education and from Congress to hold them accountable.
What did you think when President Trump threatened to obliterate the entire Iranian civilization?
He was focusing on the Iranian regime. And what did it do? It brought the Iranians to the table. It led to the ceasefire. We know that President Trump has very strong statements when it comes to his tweets, but it has been targeted towards the Iranian terrorist regime.
He said the entire civilization will die.
And it's very important to note that he was focused on the Iranian terrorist regime. And Jake, isn't it true that it brought the Iranians to the table to a ceasefire agreement? It did, because they had a ceasefire agreement going on for days. And President Trump is correct to call out the Iranian terrorist regime, which has financed Hamas and Hezbollah, which I believe has led to some of the financing of this skyrocketing of anti-Semitism. But that's, Jake, you can ask this question, but the reality is it was targeted towards the Iranian terrorist regime. It was an effective tool to bring them to the table. They have no cards, and frankly, we're not going to see peace in the Middle East until we get rid of the Iranian terrorist regime.
Quote, your whole civilization will die tonight. He didn't say the regime will be wiped out. He said your whole civilization will die tonight. And I just have to say, it's interesting that a 20-year-old college kid on a campus yelling from the river to the sea, that's worthy of condemnation. But a president of the United States who actually
You don't think it's worthy of condemnation? Jake, you don't think it's worthy of condemnation of students that are targeting Jewish students, that are physically assaulting them, that are spitting in their face, that are drawing swastikas on their doors?
I don't need a lesson
who have to hire security.
I don't need a lesson on what it's like to be a Jewish student.
Like those university presidents.
No, I'm not equivocating at all. I'm not equivocating
with those university presidents.
I'm
what
asking
I've said
if
about
you're
President Trump's tweets is it has been very targeted.
No,
I am not equivocating. I have been crystal clear.
No, not when it comes to college kids, but when it comes to a president threatening to wipe out an entire civilization. I'm saying you're applying two different standards here.
The Iranian terrorist regime. Everyone seems to understand that, Jake, except for CNN. And what did it do? It brought the Iranians to the table, delivering a ceasefire, and frankly, bringing this terrorist regime to its knees. It has been very important for us to address, frankly, this conflict that has been going on for decades. The terrorist regime that has not only hijacked the Strait of Hormuz, but has been the #1 state sponsor of terror.
I'm not supporting the regime.
So, yes, the president delivers tough diplomacy, but what he has delivered is ultimately we will see peace in the Middle East better off.
I just think a call for genocide on a college campus and a call for genocide made by the President of the United States, like, they're both bad. Right? I mean, that's what I think.
I've condemned genocide across the board. The difference with those university presidents is they couldn't answer the simple, direct question. Just calling for the genocide of Jews. President Trump didn't call for genocide, Jake. You were putting those words in his mouth. He is engaging in diplomatic back and
Your
forth.
entire
And what
civilization
did it do? It brought the Iranians to the table. And we should, it's the terrorist regime, Jake. He's targeting the terrorist regime.
You're changing his words.
You can continue the decades-long, but you're adding genocide. That's not what he
What is wiping out
stated.
an entire civilization?
In the case of the university presidents, I specifically asked them about calling for the genocide of Jews. Again, the president is correct to call out the Iranian terrorist regime, to bring them to the table, to force a ceasefire, and frankly, to free the Middle East from this largest state sponsor of terror that has not only killed American lives, but has targeted Israel and the United States of America, including assassination attempts against our elected officials.
Is calling for wiping out a civilization, is calling for wiping out an entire civilization
the
bad or
Iranian
good?
terrorist regime.
But that's not what he said.
Of course it's bad. That is not what he is calling for. He wasn't calling for genocide.
Your entire civilization
It was targeted towards the Iranian terrorist regime.
All right.
It was targeted towards the Iranian terrorist regime.
Agree to disagree. The book
CNN. This is typical CNN.
Okay.
If you want to compare the President of the United States to the university presidents who failed to call for the condemnation of calling for the genocide of Jews, that's on you, Jake. The world saw how morally equivocating those university presidents were. Yes, you're the one that is it's not a comparison. So if you want to make that comparison,
you have the
that's
same
on
standard
CNN.
for somebody.
That is not the comparison. Of course, genocide is bad across the board, Jake. President Trump effectively brought the Iranians to the table. He effectively delivered a ceasefire, and he is going to effectively deliver peace to the Middle East to stop, frankly, the killing of the Iranian terrorist regime, which kills their own people and has created havoc across the Middle East.
We have people who actually supported the strikes against Iran, Iranian Americans and Iranian advocates, on the show all the time, and they all were horrified when President Trump called for a genocide of the Iranian, to quote unquote, wipe out your entire civilization.
He's not calling for a genocide of the Iranians. It's targeted towards the Iranian terrorist regime. It's been consistent throughout, Jake. And again, that has brought the Iranians to the table. And let's talk about the Iranians have killed tens of thousands of their own people.
Yeah,
so if
horrifying.
you want to prop up the Iranian terrorist regime, that's on you. The president has been very effective in calling out the Iranian terrorist regime.
Got it.
Go ahead.
No, I'm not defending anything.
Here.
I'm not defending anything. I'm saying it's all bad, calling for genocide, calling for wiping out civilizations, whether it's some knucklehead on a college campus or Mahmoud Khalil or this person or that person or President Trump. All of it's bad. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, thank you so much.
President Trump
Appreciate
was
your time.
not calling for genocide. Shame on CNN for saying that.
I read the quote. Thank you so much. Up next.